Hi, everybody. This is Anna here from Doing Everything with Anna and Sally. Before we jump into today's episode, which we recorded a few weeks back with Katie, we do want to take a moment to speak on the current state of our country and Black Lives Matter. So Sally and I talked about this, and we just wanted to make sure we used our platform to say what we felt needed to be said. So after these words, we'll jump into the episode. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in.
I don't know that I'll ever be able to give this topic justice. I've had to record it multiple times over because there are things that I say that aren't enough or aren't right. But the message that I want to get across is that Black Lives Matter and that George Floyd shouldn't have had to die, but also George Floyd being murdered, more specifically, should not have had to be the thing that caused people to believe that police brutality is an issue. It's been an issue. We've been ignorant to it. I've been ignorant to it, and I wish that I hadn't been, and I wish that I had been more active in trying to learn and trying to educate myself, even though I would like to believe that I have put some effort towards it in the past. I know that I haven't done enough. And the onus is on us. The onus is on every person listening. You can live your life being ignorant to things that make you uncomfortable, but you will never be able to grow from it. And if you are uncomfortable with something someone else says, there's probably a reason for it, and it's probably worth having a difficult conversation about it. It may feel strange, it may be awkward, it may be weird, but if you are standing up for people who may not have a voice in the conversation, it is 100% worth it. And I know that I've let people get away with saying things that aren't right, and I know that it just perpetuates the problem. You know, saying something that's derogatory versus murdering someone, it's a lot different, but it's still perpetuating racism. And it needs to end. Whether or not there will ever be an end to racism, I don't know, but to this extreme, I think there's something that we can work on. So those are my thoughts.
I would say the same thing, that Black Lives Matter. The murder that we've seen the last couple of weeks very graphically on the news is disgusting and absolutely cannot be stood for. And I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry that it took, I don't think I was actively racist, but I don't think I was practicing anti-racism, because I'm sorry that it took what we have seen over the last couple of weeks for me to really become super concerned about the topic. And I also agree that I didn't have exposure to this topic growing up. I was taught white history, Black history, women's movements, any of that was elective, and that's ridiculous and needs to be changed. And I'm not a big social media poster, but I'm really trying to do my part to actually learn instead of just posting things. I think posting things is also super important. That's not what I have been doing, but I've been trying to do some research. If you have things you want me to read, send them my way. And if you have organizations I should look into, send them my way. I'm trying to do something every single day to better educate myself, and I want to make sure I'm doing it in the right way. Black Lives Matter, and we're both really disgusted with what has happened, but really hopeful for change and wanting to be a part of that. Even if you think that you've done a good job, we can always do better.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's probably what we should say on it at this point, and we will both continue to learn and support.
Yeah, and we can put stuff down in the description about how you guys can help, petitions you can sign, places you can donate, and we'll try to help as much towards this using our voice, because we do have platforms to talk on, even if they seem small. It's still
we're trying
worth
to grow them, yeah, and we
Yeah.
we definitely will make this a continued effort. As Sally said, we don't want this
It's
conversation to end next week or next month. This conversation needs to continue until there's legitimate change, and it needs to continue until things are right.
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to Doing Everything with Anna and Sally. I'm Sally.
And I'm Anna.
And Anna's going to introduce our special guest for today.
All right, everybody. Today we have a friend of mine with us. So Kati is a research specialist for a biomedical research center. In undergrad, she studied applied nutrition and women's and gender studies. And apparently 2 degrees just wasn't enough because she'll soon be starting a graduate program in public health nutrition. Kati likes pretty much any outdoor activity with special bonus points if it involves water. As an avid podcast listener herself, she's told us she's excited to make her podcast debut with Doing Everything. So warm welcome to Kati. Kati, if you want to introduce yourself, say hi to our 5 listeners.
Well, thanks for that sparkling introduction. I don't know that I totally have anything to add to it, but I'm very excited to be here.
Yay, we're excited to have you.
Welcome.
I really debated. I was like, should I talk about public health or should I just spew hot takes on sandwiches for an hour? Because I can
hot takes on sandwiches. Give me a hot take.
Okay, well, so it takes a while to build into my hot takes because I've been doing research. I've been asking people their favorite sandwiches for about a month now, kind of dropped off in the last week. I go through phases during quarantine and I went through a sandwich phase. I think the best sandwich of all time is a BLT.
Okay.
Which doesn't seem to be a universally shared opinion, but it's really surprising the things that people say are the best sandwiches of all time, because people really tend to stick with the familiar. There are a lot of PB&J or
Ew, no,
butter and
absolutely not.
Grilled cheese was very common at a few barbecues. I think barbecue is definitely my top 5.
Barbecue as just pulled pork?
Like a barbecue sandwich.
Are hamburgers allowed in this category?
I think a hamburger is absolutely a sandwich.
I would think so too, but I'm pretty sure I've had an argument with someone about it, whether it's a sandwich or a burger. I'm like, a burger is a sandwich.
Yes, I think all burgers are sandwiches. Not all sandwiches are burgers, like rectangles and squares. I think you really get into it. See, when you start asking people their favorite sandwich, then you get into what is a sandwich. do hot dogs count? Do pitas count?
No!
Is a taco a sandwich?
I was waiting for it.
I knew this was going to happen.
I know, it's very hard.
A hot dog is not a sandwich. Sally would disagree.
I think a hot dog, if you say a sub is a sandwich, you have to say a hot dog is a sandwich.
Boom.
It's the same structure. It's the exact same structure. How is it not a sandwich? Is the sub you get from Subway a sandwich?
Yes.
Same thing.
It's the same as a hot dog, except for your meat is cylindrical.
I don't have a good argument. I just don't like it.
Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah.
I
helped my friend write. He had one of those public speaking classes where you had to do take a position speech, and we wrote it. I probably shouldn't have helped him write his paper, but I did.
We wrote it.
Yeah, no, we wrote one on I was just there spitballing ideas. He did more of the writing. Mm-hmm. But we did one on how to throw a good party, and we did one on is a hot dog a sandwich? And the origins of the term sandwich is actually the Earl of Sandwich, who put his meat in the bread so that he could carry it better, because I'm pretty sure he was playing croquet or something. Don't totally quote me on that. But that's vaguely the idea, right? So I don't know. I think any carb that's a carrying thing for filling it speaks to the idea, the foundational idea of a sandwich.
So a gyro?
Yeah, I think that's a sandwich.
A gyro would definitely be a sandwich.
But then, sandwich, the Earl of Sandwich, when did this even happen? There were sandwiches that existed far before the Earl of Sandwich. If a taco is a sandwich, then arguably a taco is the original sandwich, and we should be calling everything tacos. decolonize the sandwich.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I do want to know eventually though, like whenever you've decided you've collected enough data, I need to know what the most favorite sandwich is. And
Right
if there's
now?
variations on that.
Yeah.
Because like I am a big fan of a grilled peanut butter and jelly.
Oh my god, me too.
Ew, just
It's so
stop with the
good.
peanut butter and jelly. I'm boycotting it as a sandwich.
You cannot, if you include hot dog, you cannot boycott the OG PB&J. Like,
Well, I'm not saying a hot dog is my favorite type of sandwich. I'm just saying that it is a sandwich. But
okay.
if we're saying that a hot dog is not a sandwich, then a peanut butter and jelly should not either.
We'll leave that.
That's a hot take.
We're gonna table that conversation because I can't go there right now. But agree with Katie, that's a hot take. So when you haven't been stirring up controversy about sandwiches, either of you, what have you been up to? How's everyone doing?
I can start. I'm doing okay. I'm currently in a closet right now recording, so that's fun. There's a gun right here, so that's super interesting and scary.
Wait, there's a what beside you?
Jesus Christ, Sally.
It's not my closet if you didn't get that.
Are you trapped? Are you okay?
Blink twice if you need help.
Who knows?
Wait, they probably wouldn't have put the gun with you.
Yeah. Well, there's more than one, but it's fine. If our audience could see my setup right now, it basically just looks like I'm a prepper.
Nice.
But anyways, yeah, I'm doing great. I started grad school kind of last week.
Woo!
Yeah, just reviewing statistics after work every day. So, swamped.
Exhilarating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Should get better.
Yeah, that's good. Katie, what about you? How are you?
Things are good. I'm moving this weekend, so that is consuming my life right now.
Yeah, are you bringing like a lot of furniture or?
Yeah, so my dad has a truck and our family friend has a trailer, and Facebook Marketplace here has been popping. So I got this really great table and chairs that I'm so excited about. It's going to be so good to study on. That's
Nice.
the thing that's really getting me going right now. And we have bulk pickup here once a month. And so for the week of bulk pickup, they do it in different areas every day based on when your trash pickup is. And so I found the map and I was strategically doing my runs where the bulk pickup was going to be so I could scout it out. And so I got some good stuff from there too. I got this fantastic desk and all this stuff. So yeah,
nice.
Lots of furniture to take. And we also started dumpster diving. So I got something from there too and like refurbished this table console.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be a very thrifty and nerdy podcast, guys.
That sounds about right for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm saying that with true honesty. Like, I'm pretty sure that's what this is going to be.
To what level do you do dumpster diving? Is it just like furniture, or is it like deeper than that?
So I go for the furniture. Actually, I'm going to show you guys because I can. So I pulled this out of a dumpster.
It looks pretty nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it used to be all black and gray and like scratched up and stuff. And so I like took it apart and painted it white and green and spruced it up a bit.
Nice.
I think I'd make a really good plant shelf. That's my vision. We'll see. Whatever we need it for. We don't know yet. So I go for the furniture pieces. My dad, we just got backyard chickens. And so my dad has been pulling out like PVC pipe, pieces of wood, anything that would potentially be useful for a chicken coop.
I love it.
There's a lot of construction around here. So on Sundays when there's not construction, we just, make a little lap.
Nice. That's good. I'm trying to think if I have any fun updates. Not really. I did drive by, Kitty, your favorite consignment store, and I saw that it reopened. So that's some exciting news.
Dang, they've been texting me. I'm subscribed to their text message updates, and they keep on texting me about sales and openings, and it's hard because I want to thrift, but also I don't even live there anymore, but also I don't want to go shopping right now. Like I'm not doing that. So
Yeah,
I
I haven't done it yet. I haven't been into Target since definitely, I don't think I even went in February, so I'd say like January or 2019. Like,
Dang.
it's been a minute.
I went once in February because I lost my luggage one time and I had to go into Target and buy like a whole outfit to survive until they found it. And that was in like mid-February.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I was in a store other than a grocery store, I think.
I think me too. So let's segue into public health if everyone's cool with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So Katie, as we mentioned in your intro, you are going back to study public health nutrition, and I know that public health has definitely been something that's been important to you throughout undergrad, and I don't know, maybe we'll get into this possibly before undergrad, but we'd like to talk to you about it, and I think it's probably good to start with, for me and probably for our listeners as well, how you define public health. So how would you define public health? What would you say public health means?
Yeah, so I think now's a really interesting time because everybody's kind of talking about public health, but like a really small part of public health. So coronavirus and pandemics and epidemiology is definitely part of public health, but public health overall is looking at how can you promote health and prevent disease before it even happens, like on a widespread scale. So like medicine is going to be treating disease after it happens, but public health is trying to get a bit more upstream and say like, okay, how do we make sure this doesn't even happen in the first place? So like really notable public health things that are in your everyday life are seatbelts. Like that was a public health intervention. Or like the very kind of like the foundation of public health, like when it first started, was everyone was getting sick in this area of a city. And so someone finally thought to look at the water source and figured out that it was a contaminated well. And so they like fixed the well and cleaned the well instead of all these doctors having to treat every person who came in with the disease from that contaminated water.
Okay, cool. So it's preventing like spread of disease. It's kind of being more proactive about it.
Yeah. And so that applies, that's infectious disease, which we're seeing a lot of right now, but it's also like non-communicable diseases, like how do we prevent obesity? How do we prevent cardiovascular diseases and things like that? And so nutrition gets a little bit more into that. How do we prevent food insecurity?
Okay. So that probably segues a little bit into like what facets of public health are you really interested in?
Yeah, so I'm really into the food side of things. I studied nutrition in undergrad. I'm going to be studying it in grad school as well. And so I am really interested in how we can promote food security, how we can promote healthy diets in everybody. And so that's hard because when you start looking at food security, it kind of gets to, it's more than just what choices that individuals are making. It's looking at that big umbrella. And so you're looking at policy, you're looking at food systems that encompasses production and transportation and distribution, economics, all of those things. And so it's a big area. Like my personal view is that like anything that's interesting enough to be really into is really complicated, right? Like no one's interested in something that's really simple. And probably it's true that most things, if you really get into it, it's way more complicated than you think it is. And so when you're looking at like the choices that someone makes, the food choices that someone makes, it's not just that person deciding, I'm going to eat this. There's so many things that go into it. It's how they grew up. It's the resources that they have access to. It's the time that they have access to. It's all these different things. And so that's what I'm into. I'm really into kind of the research side of it. I like research and I like figuring out what the best practices are. I think it's really important that we're all pushing in the right direction. And so figuring out what works and what doesn't work is something that I'm really excited to do more of.
How did you get interested in nutrition and all of that?
I think I first started getting into nutrition because I was really athletic in high school. And so first it was purely from a performance standpoint. I was like, what can I do to make myself swim faster? That is the only thing I care about. And then I kind of started pulling back and realizing like, oh, like, you know, a lot of my friends are like really struggling with eating disorders or their relationship to food. And then I started coming at it from this other perspective and realizing all of the different like relationships and complexities that food has. And so that's kind of what got me into nutrition. And then once I started getting into nutrition, there are like different ways that you can go with it. You can go more clinical, you can go more public health, and public health is what I decided to do.
Gotcha.
Do you know what kind of pushed you more towards that public health side? Did you explore both sides, or?
So I haven't really explored the clinical side as much, and that's something I'm excited for about grad school, because I'm going to get to do both in grad school. But I think the thing that really pushed me towards the public health side is I got involved with a research group in undergrad that was working on the public health side. It was doing nutrition education interventions and training students to be nutrition educators, and kind of looking at how we could best train nutrition educators that were the most effective, the most inclusive, had the best results. And so that's kind of, I think, what got me started on the public health side of things. And then once I dove into nutrition education, I realized, again, how complex it was, how much more there was in nutrition. And I've been doing it ever since.
I think I know what program you're talking about. Are you talking about like the knife skills and like the training program, or?
Yeah, a packed kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
It's a service learning program at NC State where we would train students to be nutrition educators for the first half of the semester, and then we would support them as they went out in the community in the Raleigh area and taught cooking and nutrition classes for 6 weeks. So that was a partnership with the Interfaith Food Shuttle and Share Our Strength, which is a nationwide nutrition education program. It's called Cooking Matters. And we had all different types of participants. We were in the DHIC, which is a low-income, like senior affordable housing group. We worked with the Boys and Girls Club, so kids, teenagers, senior adults, and they've since expanded. They're constantly evolving. It's one of my favorite programs because they're always innovating. Now they, instead of having students work with one of those groups for the whole semester, they do more pop-up activities, and so students can rotate through different demographics. They work with refugee populations, so students can go into the homes of refugees and learn about their stories and learn about what food and culture means to them. And all of that is just creating better nutrition educators that are more attuned to what their clients need.
That's really cool.
Anna had mentioned to me that you were in AmeriCorps, and I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah, so I did AmeriCorps Vista. I've actually done AmeriCorps 2 times.
Oh, okay.
I did an AmeriCorps summer internship a few years ago with a camp for girls in rural West Virginia. And I was the science intern. And so we were just trying to get girls excited about science and realize that science is everywhere. It belongs outdoors. And there's so much more to it than what you might get in a typical like public school classroom, or, not everyone has the best relationship to science. And so that was really awesome. And I also got to work on garden-based nutrition education. My final project for them was kind of a how-to guide on how to integrate this amazing production garden that they had into the science curriculum. Because we know that when students are super engaged in learning, which they often are in a gardening science setting, then they learn better, they're more excited. So I did that, and then that kind of led into my second AmeriCorps experience, which was AmeriCorps Vista. I was it was the food security program, and I was a community garden Vista.
And when you say food security, can you tell us a little bit more what that means?
Yeah, so food security, we're really just making sure that people have access to healthy, affordable, culturally appropriate foods. Like that's the goal, is we want everyone to have access to the foods that they want and that their body needs. And so a big part of that is looking at a regional food system. So I worked with our local food policy network, which is basically a collection of everyone in the area who is interested in food and who is working on food, and making sure that, again, we're all pushing in the same direction and we're working together. So I worked a lot through my AmeriCorps experience. I was working with school and community gardens. I worked on a few different things. My favorite thing that I did was work with the Garden Corps program, which was an intergenerational gardening and nutrition education program. So we had active older adults and teenagers, and we brought them together every week to learn about nutrition, to cook hands-on, to garden hands-on. They got to take plants home and take care of them at home. So really just trying to create that holistic, like, this is like, it's important that you eat fruits and vegetables. This is where they come from. This is how you can make them. And then also building those connections between two groups that often don't necessarily spend a lot of time together, older adults and teenagers. So that was really fun. I really enjoyed that program.
It seems like education is really, really important to you as far as like the things you've done related to public health and public health nutrition, like starting with a packed kitchen, you know, both of your AmeriCorps experiences. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. I think that's also a part of public health that I've had a really interesting relationship with and have had a lot of personal growth stem from as I like think about education, because there's this like tension between individuals and systems, right? And like you can't leave behind individuals and not treat individuals while you're pursuing systemic change, but you also can't just focus on individuals, because then you never change the system. And then you also have to think about, there's only so much that education can do, right? Like, I'm going to get really excited if one of my participants uses unit prices for the first time in a grocery store. Like, that's a big moment. That's a big moment for personal budgeting. Like, they're applying things, they're learning, and like nutrition education can make a really big difference to one person working within the resources that they have, but it doesn't change the resources that they have. You are not going to meal prep or budget your way out of poverty. And so it's a tool to help people cope with the realities of our system, but we have to change the system. So that's been like a big learning area for me, because at first, you know, whenever I was earlier in undergrad, like that was my thing, right? It was like, I was like, nutrition education, that's what I want to do. Like, I had this, do you remember the activity that Eva had us do where you write out your mission and vision statements?
Mm-hmm.
So I had these mission and vision statements that I had posted on my wall for a few years because, so to backtrack, Anna and I in our scholarship program on freshman retreat, we had to write these mission and vision statements for ourselves. And I did not write these at freshman retreat, because when I was a freshman, I had no flipping idea what I wanted to do, no idea what my vision was, my mission, whatever. But I was a facilitator for that a few years later. And so I was there with a younger group of freshmen, and they did the same activity. And I was like, oh, I could actually maybe do this at this point in my life. And so I created these mission and vision statements. And they were something along the lines of like, my mission is to give people the like knowledge, skills, and confidence to make healthy decisions for themselves, or something along those lines. And I still think that's really important. And I had it on my wall for a few years. It kind of went away. And then I started thinking about it more this year. When I went back and read them, I was like, that's great, but like, there are so many gaps there that doesn't account for why people are in these situations in the first place, why people are struggling to feed their families. Like, that just, you can't move past that situation if you aren't focusing on other things like economic opportunity and racial equity and a food system that actually works for everybody instead of just large corporations. And so I am really passionate about education, because I think it's like so empowering to be able to feed yourself and feel confident knowing what you can do to make your body function well and to feel good in your body. But I also recognize that so many people are limited by their resources and their situation and the food system that we've built. So there it is. Those are all my thoughts on that.
No, that's good to hear. So education definitely was, you know, a big focus from the get-go, but then like, as you've learned more, it sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you've realized really how multifaceted it is. And there's kind of like that, I don't want to say like conflicting view, because like you said, education is really important, but just the need to acknowledge all the different pieces that make up public health nutrition and public health in general.
Yeah. And, you know, it takes so many different types of people and so many different skill sets to tackle really complex issues like hunger and health. And so, you know, there are some people who they're going to focus on nutrition education and that is their thing, and they're doing really great work and that matters a ton. And then there are going to be people who are focusing on something totally different, and that's also great. And I think for me, I don't want to solely focus on education. Like I would like to pull back and be a little bit more, I don't know if high level is the word, because again, like I do think it's really important that we have people at every step in this process. I just want to be at a different step, I guess.
Like looking more at like the whole picture.
Yeah. I want to be a little bit more involved in policy. I also, like I talked about, I'm really into research. So there are all these like nutrition education programs that are really great and have been validated by research to improve outcomes in XYZ categories. But then there are also, you know, in someone's confidence in budgeting or how much they spend on food or their consumption of fruits and vegetables. Like nutrition education absolutely moves the marker on those things, but we can do more.
Yeah.
And just because you improve a little bit doesn't mean that someone is in a great place if they started in a really tough place. So I want to be able to impact more, and I want to be able, I think like really what I want to do is working to identify like what should we be doing. We can put all the time in the world into something, but if it only works a little bit, then all of that time could have been better spent doing something else. So I just want to figure out what those things are. So we're like being effective with our time and effort. It's a big thing. So don't want to waste any of it.
Yeah. So after you're done with grad school, will you still be doing research or will you be doing something else, or do you not know at this point?
I don't really know.
Understand.
That's one of the things I'm really excited about for grad school, because I've never formally studied public health. I did applied nutrition, which has a lot of public health in it. And I did women's and gender studies, which, you know, my purpose in combining those two, in addition to being really interested in both fields independently, is I thought that that was my best shot at getting public health at a school that doesn't have public health. You have that deep dive, like more science oriented, like I was in a lot of biochem and like hard skills kind of, I don't know. And then you had that overarching systems perspective. And so I got to use kind of both sides of that. But then, I've never really been in a formal public health program. And then this is probably a good time to explain what my program is, because it's a bit unique. So I'm getting my master's in public health, focusing in nutrition. And I'm also getting my registered dietitian's license. So it's kind of a dual degree program. So I'm doing the public health side, and then I'm also being licensed to do the clinical side. And so I'm really getting like the full spectrum of public health nutrition, which is awesome. And it's a field I'm really interested in. So obviously I am so psyched to learn all about it. And I've never really done the clinical side. And so I think that the public health side is what I'm really interested in. And I love research, and I've done it in a lot of different ways. Like I don't really do wet lab type research. It's much more like behavioral, people focused, but I'm kind of open to the possibilities because this is a new program for me, and I don't want to shutter myself into one narrow road when I know that I'm going to go into this environment where I'm going to learn things that I didn't even know I didn't know.
So since it's the kind of two sides of public health, is it still just kind of like a normal 2-year master's program, or is it longer or shorter?
So it's 2 years. It's the same length as a normal master's in public health would be, but master's of public health always has practice or like field experience. And so for those, so I take more hours than a typical MPH student might take. So I'm going to be real busy. So we have more hours so we can get in our dietetics requirements. And then in the place where we would typically be doing our public health internships, we're using those to fulfill both the public health accreditation requirements and the dietetic accreditation requirements. So it's a combined, if I did the two separately, it would take me 4 years, 3 or 4 years, but because I'm doing it together and it's a very specific coordinated program that's accredited by both institutions or both agencies, I get to do both of them. It's going to be pretty intense, I think, but I'm really excited about it. So my first year, my summer internship is going to be clinical based, and then with a bit of public health at the end. And then my second year, it's going to be all public health based in the summer. So I'll be going straight through, like I'll have fall, spring, internship all summer, fall, spring, internship all summer. And then in August, I'll be eligible to sit for the registered dietitian exam.
I don't think it sounds like you know exactly like what area you want to be in, like research or clinical or maybe not education, but what you want to do when you graduate. I'm just curious if you've ever considered running for like office or getting involved in like public policy.
I've considered getting involved in public policy more than I have considered running for public office. I can't say that running for public office particularly appeals to me, but like policy is something that I could absolutely see myself getting into. And maybe I'll change my mind on this. Again, I'm like pretty open, but I think at this point I would rather be doing like, what are the best practices? What is this? And I really like nuance, like I like being able to dive into things and being like, these things are both true at the same time. And how does that happen? And I feel like that is not very conducive to being a politician. And
Not at all.
And maybe that's something we would benefit from having in public office, but it just doesn't seem like something I would really want to do. I'd rather I think at this point, I would rather be the one providing the information to elected officials and saying, like, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, like, here's our recommendations for how you can make the best decisions for your constituents.
Okay, I could see that, like being the subject matter expert that's like, hey, I've done the field work, I've done the research, I've done all that there is to do, and I can provide you the information. I definitely see you like being an advocate for change in public policy. Maybe not in office, but like I know that Katie's going to be someone who's like, no, we need to make this better, and here's why, and here's how we should do it. So
yeah, I would definitely like to do that. And who knows, maybe a number of years down the line, I'll decide, you know what, I could do this better. I'm running. I'm not ruling that out, but it's not a concrete goal.
Yeah.
Well, when they aren't listening to you, then you can do it.
Yeah, when they stop listening, I'm going rogue.
What would your response be if someone asked you, why is public health important, or why do we need public health?
This is such an interesting time to be in public health because for the first time ever, I don't have to explain it as much. Like everybody understands it. When I tell people I'm going to grad school for public health, they're like, oh, okay. Which is just historically not the case. But, I think public health is important because it's one of those things that it touches all of us. But, okay. So one of the things that has been talked about a lot when you're thinking about coronavirus, which everybody's thinking about, is people have been saying, if we get to the end of this and we're like, man, like that was so underwhelming, like we thought it was going to be so much worse, then that's when you know that it worked. And that's the thing about public health. If you're doing your job well, then things aren't happening, which is way harder to understand than reacting to things that are happening. And so in that sense, it can be hard to conceptualize like what a difference it's made in your everyday life. But there are so many things that are just non-issues for us, for the vast majority of Americans these days because of public health interventions. And, I value my health and I value the time that I get to spend hanging out with my family and not worrying about if I'm going to be able to pay for food or if I'm going to be able to go on a walk because something's wrong with my body or something like that. Like there's that saying, that like, if you are healthy, you wish for a million things. And if you're not healthy, the only thing you want is to be healthy. I think it's just like one of the most important thing.
Yeah.
And, I hope that people don't just associate public health with like being locked in their houses for months or something like that. But there's just like, if you take a step back and you look around, like seatbelts, vaccines, I guess controversial at this point, but vaccines, like the food that you eat every day, like every wheat product you eat is enriched. And that's a public health program. When we started like processing flour, it took out some of these essential nutrients and it started affecting, like there were a lot of like birth defects. There's a very certain like folate is really important in like the 21st to 27th day post-conception. So like before you even know you're pregnant, you need this specific nutrient. And if you don't have it, then your baby is going to be at way higher risk for neural tube defects. And when we realized that, we started fortifying wheat products, and the rate of neural tube defects plummeted because of this public health intervention. And so then now that's something that people aren't having to deal with nearly as often as they used to. Like, it changed their everyday life virtually zero, like you're just eating the same thing, but we made that upstream intervention. I wasn't there.
That's a neat example though, because that's something that like I knew nothing about. I'm sure like the average American had no idea that was one of the many reasons they might, add to our bread and grain products. Like,
yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even really think about like even seat belts as a public health issue. I would think of it as maybe public safety, but I can see how they would go along the same lines.
Yeah, I mean, now I feel like I'm thinking of like, so I'm guessing like warnings on cigarette containers and like on alcohol containers, those are probably public health initiatives, right?
Yeah, like figuring out that, I mean, this is like medicine and public health, but realizing that you shouldn't drink when you're pregnant. That's a thing that, pretty much everybody knows now, but for a while we didn't know. Cigarettes, for a while we didn't know. So there's also, if you look at the supplemental nutrition assistance program, SNAP, WIC, all these social safety net programs those are public health interventions.
So Anna was telling me that you had spent some time in Guatemala, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
So I spent 2 summers in Guatemala while I was an undergrad. The first summer I was doing ethnographic research on corn. So it was an ethnographic field school. So everyone was placed in different towns around this lake in the Western Highlands, like the biggest lake in Central America. It was so beautiful. And we were living with host families in like these indigenous towns, and we were all doing independent research projects. And I decided to do mine on corn and Maya women's relationship to corn and how that relates to change in their communities and modernization. It was really interesting. Like, there was a lot of identity related to being like a tortilla provider in the family. Like, women would like really equated their status as a woman with their ability to provide their family with tortillas. And then it was really interesting. And that actually kind of got me started down the research path, because that was the first time I'd done research that wasn't in a lab. I did it once in high school in a lab, and I was like, this sucks. I don't like this at all. I don't want to do this. Research is terrible. Write it off. And then I did this, and I was like, wow, like, this is so cool. Like, actually, like, getting out. And ethnographic research is really cool because you're in the community. Like, it's a participatory experience. And so it's not like pretending like you're some objective scientist. You're like, I was there. Like, this is how I saw it, and so I think that's really important, is like recognizing your own perspective, because everyone brings perspective to the table, whether or not they want to recognize it. And so because of that experience, I actually met up with this NGO while I was there. They happened to be doing something in the community that I was living in, and I got connected with them. And then I came back 2 summers later, and I interned with them as a food security and community development intern. And so there I was working a lot, again, with a little bit of nutrition education, a little bit of like anthropometric tracking. And so tracking height and weight in preschools across the region to be able to quickly identify students who were struggling. So the area struggles with like a chronic malnutrition really, really badly. And basically chronic malnutrition results in stunting. Kids are literally smaller, like they're not growing. And so if you're tracking height and weight, you can pretty quickly identify like, this kid isn't meeting these benchmarks. Like, you can watch their growth curve like level out, and you'd be like, something's going on there. Like, we need to figure out what's going on. We need to intervene. So that's what I did in Guatemala.
That's super cool.
It was really cool. It was like one of the most intense growth experiences I've had, because I was learning so much about food security and community development, and this organization was really fascinating. Like, it was mostly local people, and so I was getting to like watch people advocate for their own communities and be able to say like, I know these people, like, this is what's going on. I understand it. And like, this is what I think we should do to change it.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side of that, I also like saw a lot of the puppetry that is involved in NGOs, and the organization that I was with catered a lot to US donors and changed how they were operating to please donors, which was infuriating.
Yeah.
And it was so hard to watch the organization do things that I knew weren't effective, and that a lot of the staff knew weren't effective because the donors had such big sway. The people who know best what a community needs is going to be the people living in that community. Like, those types of programs, like when it's a direct program where the donor really gets to decide, I feel like puts way more power in the hands of a donor. And you also don't get to invest in those more community level interventions if you're only, the donor sends money to this kid. And what if this other kid isn't as cute, doesn't get picked up by a donor, and then they're shit out of luck? Like, it just, yeah. And so like in those situations, like, number one, the community members know what they need and they know what's going to work. And number two, the things that are going to be the most effective are going to be programs, not donating to one kid one off in this really sporadic way. What a lot of people said they wanted was like job training, like giving someone these really concrete skills that they can then take out and get a job and have a sustainable income is going to be so much more effective than, congrats, I bought you a birthday cake.
Yeah.
Pat myself on the back.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel that working in food security and community development outside of the U.S., and I guess even research in food and nutrition and, your ethnographic research, how do you feel like that shaped your perspective on public health and nutrition?
Well, one of the really big things that sparked was this like internal interrogation into, like when I was there interning, I had this really big ethical debate of like, should I even be here? Like, is what I'm doing ethical? And thinking about like, what is my place in the global community? And like, white saviorism is totally a thing, and I have totally done that before, and it's something that I still struggle with, and I'm trying to figure out, how I can be like a positive advocate for change locally and globally, while also respecting the sovereignty of other communities and trying to avoid like repeating this colonial cycle that we see over and over again. So there's that. And then I also think anytime you get into a different environment, you see things differently. Wow, profound.
But true. Profound.
But true.
Yeah, true.
But, I was there in this totally brand new environment, and my whole purpose was to do research. And so I was writing down everything. And like, I came out with like 150 pages of like 12-point font, single-spaced field notes. Like, that's how much I wrote when I was there, just taking notes on everything around me. And I could very easily do that in my hometown. I just don't, because it's familiar to me. But there's the same amount of information and amount of observations you could make about right here. And so I think getting out into this very new context and like putting on my research eyes and like putting on my public health eyes there allowed me to come back and do it more easily here. Like when I was talking earlier about how corn is such a big part of culture in the Western Highlands of Guatemala. Well, that's also like food is a huge part of culture here. It's a huge part of culture in my own life. Like some of my favorite memories when I was little is at my grandparents' house, like playing in their garden or learning how to bake certain things with my mom. And there's always going to be those dishes where as soon as I have it, it makes me think of this one specific memory. It makes me think of my family or something like that. Like everyone has those associations. I hadn't really turned my eye inward, but because I was so focused on doing it in this new context and I learned all these skills and thought about it so much, I feel like I was able to take that back and be like, oh, everything that's happening out there happens here too. We don't have to leave to learn about food security, to learn about food and culture. Like it's here too. You just have to realize that.
That's so neat that you were able to learn so much from this experience, but then also apply it in your everyday life. So I feel like this is a really great place to wrap up. First, we want to say, Katie, thank you so much for giving us insight into public health and nutrition and food policy. I feel like I still have a ton that I could learn, but I've got a good starting point. And it was also really nice to just hear a little bit about your perspective. And we are super excited for you to start grad school and look forward to seeing all that you're going to do in the future.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Is there anything that you would like to plug?
Nah,
Okay.
I don't really have anything to plug. CDC.gov.
There we go. That's gonna be it. That's gonna be in the podcast.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, cool. Sally, do you want to do our wrap up? Are we even on Apple Podcasts now or no?
Yeah,
We are.
Oh, we are?
I checked on you today. Yeah.
Woo!
Woo. Yeah, I can do a wrap up. Thank you, Katie. Thank you guys for listening. This has been Doing Everything with Anna and Sally. And you guys can find us on any sort of streaming platforms where you find podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Music, and even YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next Tuesday.
Woo! Bye, guys.
Woohoo!
Bye.